look at your calculators, we've got four different topics which we have done this semester. So the first one really is algebra and substitution. So in terms of our calculator, the main button we're going to use with this is our solve function, but there's two different ways which you can use your solve function. You can use solve to solve an equation, or you can use solve to rearrange an equation, which I think a lot of you will forget to use in an exam, or you get confused by it. It's a really good way of being able to work out what you're doing. So, and being able to work it out without having to do all of your algebra rearranging, okay? So we're going to be using the solve function today, okay? You can use it for two things. You can use it to solve an equation, or you can use it to rearrange an equation. And we use this button in all of our well, not matrices, but we use it definitely in measurement, in trig, in SOHCAHTOA, in all of those things. So if you can know how to use this button well and know when to use it, it is going to help you substantially in both Year 11 and Year 12 apps, okay? Because this is used a lot in Year 12 apps as well, okay? So learn it now, and then you're not going to have any worries. So if we are using it to solve an equation, we need to be able to use the button. So what we're using is menu, algebra, so menu, 3, and solve, which is 1. So menu, 3, 1. Menu, 3, which is algebra, 1, which is solve. You can also just type in solve in the brackets if you wish to. So what we end up with is what's there now. So what we're doing is within this, we're telling our calculator to solve something, and it's got an open set of brackets. We're telling it to solve an equation. Inside that set of brackets, you need to put an equation. So it has to have, what does an equation always have included in it? It has to have an equal sign in it. Okay, because you're solving something, you're saying something plus something equals something, and you're solving whatever that is. If you're actually trying to solve for a number, it must only have one pronumeral. So it must have an equal sign, I'll write it a bit better. Must have an equal sign, must have one pronumeral. And you need to remember to actually tell the calculator what to solve for. So what we do is we then, once we've got to this point here, if we're trying to solve for, e.g. solve 3x plus 4 equals 12, for example, we have to tell the calculator what we actually are solving for. So inside the brackets, we write 3x. Please stop me if I'm not making sense to anybody. I really, really want everybody to know how to use this in their calculator, okay? 3x plus 4 equals 12. Okay, so I've put my equation into the brackets. It's an equation, it's got an equal sign. It's only got one pronumeral, but then I need to tell my calculator what I want to solve for. So what do I want the calculator to find an answer for? And to do that, I write comma x. That tells me what I actually want to solve for, and it will give me an answer. If you want to change from fraction to decimal, what do? Control, enter, and it'll give it to us as a decimal. But you could have written 8/3 if you want to, or you could have written 2 3/4. Be aware, I'd say half of the people in the test last week, when they got an answer like this, wrote their answer as 2.6. It's 2.6 recurring, and you need to be aware of that. And they then use that 2.6 further on, and they just use 2.6. It's actually, their answers ended up being wrong, okay, because the rounding was so far off. So just be aware that is 2.6. And the other thing to be aware of, sorry, I'll just try and give you tips as we go, is if it says 0.3, that's not a third. So if I had an answer, if my answer was 0.3, a lot of people then said, that's a third. What's a third? 0.3 recurring, 0.3 is definitely not a third. It's nowhere near it. Okay, so you're going to get, if that's the case, don't rearrange it to try, because people get it wrong. And 1/3 is not 0.3. It's 0.3 recurring. Okay, just be aware of that. Sorry, nothing to do with calculators, but just lessons to learn. All right, so in this here, we've then got our answer. There, and you just write your answer into your page. So this is the equation. Then you put a comma. Then you put what you're trying to solve for. So you have to put in the equation, you have to put in what you want the calculator to find an answer for. If you don't put in the comma part, so if you just put in an equation, you're going to get too few arguments, so you're going to get some sort of message which comes up. So it should tell you, so this functional command is missing one or more arguments. It's saying it doesn't know what to do, right? If you put in comma, for example, and then the wrong letter, because this happens a lot too, is that people put in like an equation which has P in it, but then they look for X because they're used to just writing comma X all the time. Let's see what, oh, I put it in the wrong spot. So if I go comma Y, it's rearranged it, but there's no actual Y in there. It hasn't actually done it right. So just be aware of that. You need to say what you're solving for, which is X. So it's whatever the pronumeral is, which is in the equation. It's just rearranged it to all be on one side of the equation, really. Okay. So better, just make sure that you do those little steps. The rest is quite easy. Is everyone okay with that? Yes? All right, so the other way you can use solve is if you were given an equation and you wanted to rearrange it so it had something else as a subject. So for example, let's use Pythagoras, okay? So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. What if I wanted to have b as the subject? Okay, so I've got this equation. I know what Pythagoras looks like. That's what's given to me in my formula sheet, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But I'm trying to find one of the shorter sides and I totally can't remember how to rearrange the formula. Completely forgotten how to rearrange the formula. So instead, what I can use is the solve function here. So what buttons do I press? Menu, algebra, solve, okay, and I'm going to say a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, that's my formula. Now there's 3 pronumerals in there. So I'm not going to be able to find like an answer. I'm not going to be able to find out what A equals or B equals or C equals in this thing, but I can rearrange it so that something is the subject. What's the subject mean? What equals? So just that pronumeral equals and whatever it is. So it'll rearrange the formula for you. So I need to say what I want it to actually have as the subject. So again, it's comma, because I'm trying to find that as the subject. So I'm going to say a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but I want it the subject to be b, and I press enter. Oh, it's a bit of a confusing one. But notice here, this part here, because there's a few different ways of rearranging it, b equals the square root of c squared, take a squared, and it tells you what it is there. Okay, so it will rearrange the equations as you go. Can you guys try that? Try some of that out. On your calculators, try an equation.
I don't know. I don't really care about this Yeah, if it's another Golden State and Cavs, I'm just not gonna make it.
I reckon next year it won't be Golden State and Cavs, but I reckon it'll be Golden State next year.
No, I reckon it'll be Golden State again next year. But they're not really using any of the good players. No. If anything, they're getting rid I was hoping for the Celtics or Rockets to win the good. They both have such good defense.
This final's been useful.
Yeah.
The final's been like
Even
I still reckon any way it's gonna be fun.
How do you glory?
Sorry, guys. All right, is everyone okay with solving? So solving to solve and solving to rearrange. Yeah? Okay. So you can use that solving for measurement equations. So any of your formulas with measurement. If you need to rearrange those measurement equations, if you need to solve for a side length or anything. When we do those inverse questions for volume and stuff, like where you get given the volume but you have to find the side length, these are using solve on your calculator is the best way to do it, because when you're looking at when you're looking at a question like that, you'd have to rearrange quite a bit. So for example, just do a quick example question, e.g. if I said the volume of a triangular prism is 53 square meters, the base of the triangle is 8 meters and the height of the prism is 3 meters. What is the height of the triangle? So this is one of those ones where you get given the volume, but you need to actually work out what the height, what part of what a length within the prism is. So if we look at this, we're looking at it and we're going, okay, the volume of a triangular prism. So we look at a triangular prism. I draw it out because that makes more sense to me. It's saying the volume is 53. It's saying the base of the triangle is 8 meters. It's saying the height of the prism, not the triangle, the prism is 3 meters. And it's asking you for what's this height, that height there. So to do that, I need to know what the volume formula is for a triangular prism. So so any prism is the area of the base shape times by the height. Okay, so I've got volume equals, what's the area of the base shape? How do we work out the area of a triangle? Half times base times height. Okay, and then times by the height of the prism. That's our formula. Okay, so I then sub in the numbers. Do I know V? I do, 53. So I've got 53 equals a half of 8 times X times 3. Now that, for some people, might be really easy to work out, but for others it might not be. And it's also really easy to be able to make mistakes when you're rearranging equations. So instead of even trying to solve that using your algebra skills, because this is probably going to be in a calculator section, we may as well use our calculator to solve. So I'm going to go menu, menu, algebra, solve. Let's just put it in the right spot. Menu, algebra, solve. 53 equals 0.5 times 8 times X times 3. So I'm saying the volume equals half of the base times the height of the prism. And what am I actually going to solve for? What am I looking for? The answer. What am I asked? X. Okay, so comma X, and it'll give me an answer of 4.41. And that's all the working out you have to show in this sort of question. So the height equals 4.41 metres. Any questions? So that's the sort of question in measurement you'd use this for. In terms of in algebra, it's mainly about formulas. So the formulas you get given, rearranging them, solving them. Any questions? All right. So the next part of your calculator, which you need to be able to know is, so algebra we've done, measurement, that's all we're going to need to know for measurement as well. Same similarity. So what's the only other thing we're going to use our calculators for, really? Trigonometry. So do I need to show you where sine, cos and tan are, or are you okay with that? I will quickly show you some trig stuff because I remember now. All right, so in terms of the trig things, some people got, if you're putting in an equal sign, you need to remember, if you are putting in an equal sign, you must put in solve. Your calculator's not going, if you write like sine 20 equals 3/4 into your calculator, it's not going to give you an answer because it's not, you haven't asked it to do anything. So your calculator follows your instructions. If you put in an equation, it wants to know what you want it to do with the equation. Do you want it to solve it? Do you want to rearrange it? If you just put in an equation, it's just going to make it simpler and leave it there. So you need to be aware of that. Don't forget with trig, if you are finding the angle using sine, you need to remember to put in the buttons. I'll just grab it from where we've looked at it before because otherwise it will take forever. Area in your calculator. If you guys can remember this part here, you need to be able to just cut and paste this actually. Give me a second. You need to remember to put it so that you find an angle, and between, it depends. If it's a right angle, if you know it's an acute angle, you can go 0 to 90. If you're not sure, just go 0 to 180 and pick the right one. But you need to remember, sorry, I'm just going to make this bigger for you. You need to remember to put in this part here. Now to do that, you needed to be able to use the button, which I'll just remind you of. So you needed to use the button on your calculator, which was near the equal sign. So if you go control equals, that gives you those buttons. So you're pressing control equals. To do that. All right. And that will pull up those buttons there for you to be able to do this. Now, as I said yesterday, this is all in your calculator. Now, if you can't remember what buttons to press, what do you think you could do to help yourself? If you're going, God, Miss Edwards, that's 1,000,000 buttons. I can't remember that in my exam. How can you expect me to? How do you help yourself? Put it in your notes, okay? Whenever you have a calculator, you have notes. This is why in the bottom of your notes, I want you to have a different colour which has the notes for that topic. Okay, because in Trig, I want you to have an example of this and the buttons to press, and then you can't get lost. You got step by step how to do it. Okay, but you do need to, only for finding an angle using sine, do you have to do this. So you just put in your equation, but you just need to make sure that your answer goes between 0 and 180. So what that's actually saying is I want the answers between 0 and 180. You could possibly get two answers in there. You need to pick which one's the right one. The two answers will add up to 180 always. And in the question, it will ask you for an acute angle or an obtuse angle. What's an acute angle mean? Smaller than 90, okay? So just be aware of that. Any questions with trig? There are notes and a video on YouTube about how to do that exactly. Okay? All right, so the last one is matrices, which does not start with a P. All right, so matrices still is in this part of your calculator. You have two different ways of finding matrices. You can do lots of different things with your matrices as well, okay? So we go menu. Now, anytime you get stuck on your calculator, I get stuck all the time on this calculator. I'm still learning, just like you guys are, okay? I go menu and I go, what could I use to help me? Okay, so menu, this question's about matrices. So I'm going to go menu, matrix, because that's probably got the section which is going to help me. Okay, so menu, 7, matrix and vector, and then it has this. Now, in your investigation, we did a few things with the other buttons. Really, you're only going to need create. Actually, I'll just make it. And then these. So menu. Sorry, it's not liking me. Escape. Okay, so matrix, vector, create, and then matrix. But notice you can also create a zero matrix and you can also create an identity matrix. So if you actually had to draw them, it might be easier to use that function than to write it out yourself. Okay, so we said menu, 7, which was matrix and vector, 1, which was create. So they're always the buttons you're going to have to press. And then you can then go to either 1, a matrix, which is the main one you'd be using, but you can also use the others. Okay, so you could have a zero matrix, you could have an identity matrix. So I haven't actually tried using this for an identity matrix. So let's just try an identity matrix. We'll go identity. Now let's just see how we put it in. So if I write 3, it'll give me a 3 by 3 identity matrix. So whatever number, if you want to put in identity 3, it's going to give you a 3 by 3. What's going to happen if I do identity 5? You guys are not fun today. What's going to happen if I put in identity 5? A 5 by 5 identity matrix. Look at that. Okay, so that is way easier than having to draw that out. So you just have to put the number in because identity matrices are always squares. You've just got to put the number of what the row size is going to be. If I do 0 matrix, I think it's going to be the same, but let's just double check. So I'm going to put in a 0 matrix, menu, matrix, create, 0 matrix. Now this might be a bit different. I haven't used this before, as I said. Okay, so you go comma. Anytime you're not sure if you've got two prenurals, always try and just use a comma between them. So this is actually saying I want a 5 row by 4 column 0 matrix. So with the 0 matrix, you have to put in 2 numbers. You have to put in how many rows and columns, but matrices always go with rows before columns. So therefore, that's how that gives you that. One of you move. So this is for 0. You need to put in the row first, row, and then comma, and then column. Okay? Now, if you want them to be squared, we need to be able to, you can just do the matrix and square it. But can you guys remember how to store a matrix? Good. All right. So thank you very much for answering me. So if I have this matrix, which I've written up there, it's just a 0 matrix. That doesn't matter. Okay. Actually, let's just check a number in it, just so it's not. All right. So I've got this matrix, and I want it to be A because I've been told that it's A in my test. And a lot of the time they give you like 4 different matrices, and you have to, and they have give you letters. I want to label this as A. How do I actually store it? How do I change it as A? I go Control, and then that there, because above it, it says store. Okay, so I want to say Control, store. That gives me that arrow. I then want to just, I then want to give it a name. So I want to actually, I want to say this is going to be A. And so I use an A here. And so I store it as A. Is there a way to make them capital letters? I'm sure there is. That one. Okay, Control A. No. Control Shift A. No. A. Yeah, thank you. All right, so, so just the Shift button. Got it. So that's going to make that A. And so next time when I put in A, it says lowercase a anyway. When I put in A, it's going to come out with that letter, with that matrix. And so then I can write A squared. Oh, it can't be that. Why did A squared not work? Why did it say dimension error? Because they can't be multiplied together because the rows of the second one don't equal the columns of the first one. However, if I had a square matrix, so let's get the, I'm just going to make an identity matrix. It'll be easy. Okay, so menu, matrix, create, identity matrix 3 by 3. And I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to just change a couple of numbers. All right, so I'm going to say this is B. Oh, nope, deleted. What did I do? How did it just disappear? Okay, that's all right. We deal with these things, we breathe, and then we keep going, just like in a test when this happens. All right, let's start again. Menu, matrix, create, identity 3. Declan, move. All right, I'm just going to leave it like that and not change it. I'm going to store it as B. So I'm going to go Control, var, B. And press Enter. So now it's stored as B. So if I want to write B squared, it will give me an answer, which is an identity matrix because an identity matrix times by an identity matrix equals the same thing. Anything times y in identity matrix is the same thing. But I can also say 5 times b and work out the answer as well. Or I can write a times b is not going to work, and so on. But you need to be able to store them as you go. So if we store something, we need to go control var and then give it a letter. Okay, so to store a matrix, draw the matrix. Click control var. So 2 different buttons, which should bring up an arrow. Should bring up this arrow. Allocate a letter and press enter. Okay, so what you should end up with is a matrix with an arrow and A, and then from then on, whenever you use A, that's what's going to come up. Okay? Anything in the calculator section for matrices, use your calculator to check your answers. Don't waste your time doing a whole heap of multiplication with really big matrices, like with big dimensions in a calculator section. Your calculator can do it. Just make sure you put the right numbers down and make sure you actually write down what matrix you're putting in. So in an exam, in a calculator section for matrices, if you make a mistake in the actual matrix you've done, you'll lose a mark for whatever we ask you to write, but we have to put your matrix into our calculator if you do any calculations wrong. So as long as you use the matrix you've written on your page and you show me that you're squaring it, or you show me whatever you're putting into your calculator, I have to double check that even if you've made a mistake earlier on. If you don't show me what you're putting in your calculator though, so if you don't write down the matrix you've decided to put in, I can't give you any marks for it. But usually we actually set you up to be able to do that. So usually part A is like write a matrix for this information, write a matrix for this information, multiply A and B together. And so that way we can actually like be able to follow it through as we move through. All right, I think that's pretty much it for calculators. Is there anything else people need to know on how to use their calculators? All right, it's taken a bit longer than planned.